Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our live WMUR Granite State Debate Series from the New Hampshire Institute of Politics at St. Anselm College. I'm Political Director Josh McKelvin, and tonight we will be discussing the top issues facing our state and the nation with the candidates for U.S. Senate, Republican incumbent Senator Kelly Ayotte, and Democratic challenger Governor Maggie Hassan. But first, let's have a quick look at tonight's format. Questions will come from the moderator and our panelists. Each candidate will have 1 minute to respond. Rebuttals will be at the moderator's discretion, and each candidate will also have some time at the end of this for a closing statement. But before we get started, let's get to know our panelists for tonight. Kevin Landrigan is a reporter for the New Hampshire Union Leader. John DeStaso is a political reporter at WMUR. And Allie Morris is a reporter at the Concord Monitor. So with all that out of the way, let's get started. And we're going to begin with a threat that is emerging at a very rapid pace. We're talking about cyber terrorism. Just about 10 days ago, New Hampshire technology company Dyn was the victim of repeated attacks that wound up crippling internet activity all along the East Coast, including several big-name companies. It was an attack that the experts say could easily happen again. Some people worry that attacks like these could disrupt the financial markets or knock out our power grid. A lot of people are talking about it. We're going to start with Senator Ayotte. As a member of the Homeland Security Committee, Senator, have you recommended any action that should be taken to stop this type of threat?
Well, thank you so much, Josh. It's great to be here tonight with Governor Hassan and all of you. My priority has been to keep New Hampshire and the country safe, serving on the Armed Services Committee, chairing the Readiness Subcommittee, and also on the Homeland Security Committees. This issue of cyber terrorism is a grave threat. I have worked to make sure that there are stronger agreements in place, including supporting legislation to allow the sharing, actually, of information between companies like Dyn and the government when things like that happen, to make sure that we can take the steps we need if it's a state actor, to be clear and to take affirmative steps, also to help the private companies protect personal information. And we have to take this very seriously, from threats from nation states like Iran and Russia and others who are coming after us. We also can't diminish our military. I've been the only member of our delegation to vote against automatic cuts to our military, because Cyber Command, which I support, actually establishing a separate command for Cyber Command within our armed services, needs the support and resources if we're going to stay safe in a very dangerous world and address this threat.
Senator, thanks very much. Governor Hassan, you recently signed an executive order to establish the Cybersecurity Integration Center. The press release that followed was a little bit vague, so I want to ask you what exactly this center does, and what do you think we should be doing at the federal level to counteract cyber terrorism?
Well, thank you very much, Josh, for moderating tonight. Thank you, Senator Ayotte, for being here, to St. A's for hosting us all, and to our panelists, and to all of the viewers tuning in tonight. My first job as governor is keeping our state secure and our communities safe. In the United States Senate, my first priority will always be keeping our country safe. Among the things that I've worked on as governor, in addition to adding troopers onto our roadways, making sure that we have active shooter training for our law enforcement, and enhancing school safety plans, is cybersecurity, making sure that all of our state employees have cybersecurity training, establishing standards for cybersecurity, getting rid of outdated hardware and software that made us more vulnerable. And the Integration Center you talked about is the next step in that process, making sure that all of the stakeholders in cybersecurity at the state level are working together to share information. And that's also obviously something we need to do with the private sector as well.
All right, thank you, candidates. Let's go to our panel now with the next question on a related topic, coming from John DeStaso to Governor Maggie Hassan.
Thank you, Josh. Governor, how are you? Governor, over the past several months, security experts in the U.S. have pointed to Russia as the culprit in several high-profile hacking cases. Last year, they pointed to China as most likely involved in a theft of data at the U.S. Office of Personnel Management. In cases where U.S. cybersecurity officials have evidence of a hack or cyber attack, should we counterattack, that is, trying to steal information or shut down their systems? Should we counter with conventional warfare, or should the U.S. do something else to respond?
Well, thank you for the question, John, and it's nice to see you tonight, too. Look, everything's on the table when it comes to keeping our country safe. And what we've seen from Russia in particular recently is truly outrageous. There are various acts of aggression, but including what looks like, according to our national security community, aggressive cyber attacks. We've also obviously taken action towards China in response to some of their aggressions in the cyber security arena. But what we know we have to do is continue to confront and hold accountable foreign nations for those kinds of attacks. Among the things that we should consider doing is increasing sanctions against Russia. We know some of the sanctions we've put in place for some of their acts of aggression have, in fact, really caused Vladimir Putin's close business allies grave concern and weaken them. But everything's on the table, and I think it's very important that we continue to combat cyber aggressions and cyber attacks as aggressively as we can.
Senator, good to see you tonight, too.
Good to see you, John.
Same question. Would you like me to repeat it?
No, I think very clearly whether it's Russia or China or, frankly, the country of Iran and other countries who are using cyber attacks, we have to address what they do. And that means having the staffing capability within our armed services. That means making sure that our armed services have the resources that they need and the technological background to do it. And if someone takes a step, we have to address it and hold them and make sure that we address it in turn. But also we need to understand that unfortunately when it comes to Russia, this administration has not held Russia accountable. That reset policy has been a failure, and that was something, of course, Secretary Clinton pushed, and we've not held them accountable for their invasion of Ukraine or looking at what they have done in violating the INF Treaty, whether it's cyber attacks, whether what they're doing in Syria right now. But you see when we don't respond or we aren't strong in terms of what we say in return, you're going to see them continuing to act badly.
And I have a follow-up, Senator. It's pretty much accepted that Russia has been trying to influence the impact of our election. Do you think that they've been successful in doing that?
I believe that obviously our top defense and intelligence officials will pursue and investigate anything that Russia is doing and hold them accountable for it and make sure that they do not have an impact on our election or any other matter. And again, this means, I think, being tough on actors like Russia when they are violating international treaties, when they are circumventing international law in terms of cybercrime, and when they're undermining our interests. And, you know, I've been a strong critic of the lack of action against Russia from this administration on the Armed Services Committee, going back probably 4 years from now.
Governor.
Well, certainly we have to do as much as we can to hold Russia accountable. We talked about that just a little bit ago. But look, one of the things that we know we have to do is continue to build our alliances with our NATO allies, for instance, to make sure that we have the resources and the partnerships to hold Russia accountable for its acts of aggression. I am very proud of the fact that here in New Hampshire we continue to have paper ballots and our voting machines are not hooked up to the internet, so that provides some sense of security here for Granite State voters. And I do know that our national security experts are working as hard as they can here to make sure that we are protecting our electoral system. But it is concerning to me that the Republican nominee in the presidential race has showered praise on Vladimir Putin, has praised him in some ways, invited him to make an attack of some sort on our electoral system. And that's one of the reasons I'm so concerned that Senator Ayotte spent so much time supporting the nominee.
Take a quick minute to respond.
Yeah, when you want to talk about cybersecurity, the Democratic nominee, Hillary Clinton, that Governor Hassan has followed on so many issues and really have failed to call out on this issue, she set up a private server transferring classified information, one of the most important positions in our government, and that put national security at risk. So if you want to talk about cybercrime, I mean, that was really putting information that could have jeopardized our national security at risk. And if she's not going to break with Hillary Clinton on this, when is she ever going to break with Hillary Clinton when it comes to issues where we need to stand up and make sure that we're standing up for New Hampshire and standing up for the people of this country? I mean, this was very egregious.
Take 30 seconds, Governor.
Well, I'll always stand up to Secretary Clinton or my party to serve and protect the people of New Hampshire, as I have. I disagree with Secretary Clinton on her support for President Obama's proposal to close Guantanamo, for example. I disagree with her on the internet sales tax. I disagree with her on the vetting of Syrian refugees. But, you know, let's be really clear. And by the way, I have said repeatedly that her use of emails was a mistake. She has said so as well. She has apologized. I think that's appropriate. But what's really on the line in this Senate race is whether we're going to continue to have a senator who fails to stand up to corporate special interests, which is what Senator Ayotte has failed to do,
Governor,
or whether we're going to have somebody who puts New Hampshire
first. We got to move
first.
forward. And speaking of the top of the ticket, you've both been asked repeatedly about it. Ali Morris from the Concord Monitor is going to do it again.
Governor Hassan, first to you. FBI Director James Comey's decision to investigate new emails related to Hillary Clinton's private server has thrown a cloud of uncertainty in the final days over the presidential contest. You officially endorsed Clinton in September last year and have been steadfast since. Setting aside a comparison with Donald Trump, are you prepared to say tonight that you still believe Hillary Clinton is a leader who Americans can believe and trust? And do you have any concerns about her character?
Well, first of all, I think we definitely need more information from Director Comey and the FBI. And this is an issue that has been investigated exhaustively. Secretary Clinton has said she made a mistake in the way she used her emails, and she's appropriately apologized for that. This election, this race for Senate, is how we're going to come together and continue the kind of work we've made here at home in New Hampshire, building a stronger, more innovative state. We have an unemployment rate of 2.9%, one of the lowest in the country. CNBC has named us the most business-friendly state in the country. More people are working today in New Hampshire than at any time in our state's history. We can continue, if we bring the New Hampshire approach to Washington, work across party lines to build a brighter future for all of our people, for Granite State where the middle class is growing and thriving. That's the vision that I have and I've worked towards, and I support Secretary Clinton because she shares that vision and has a record of delivering on it.
In dropping your support for Donald Trump, you said you wanted your 12-year-old daughter to someday know that rejecting him for his vulgar comments about women was more important to you than, quote, winning any election. But previously, when he called for a ban on Muslims entering the U.S., when he called Mexicans criminals and rapists, and when he mocked a disabled reporter, you did not reject him. Why weren't those statements and positions enough for you to pull your support?
Well, I called Donald Trump out on numerous occasions, including the examples that you gave. In fact, you know, I've stood up to my own party, even on issues like the government shutdown, and I'll stand up to both sides on behalf of the people of this state. But Governor Hassan, again, to call what Hillary Clinton did a mistake, it's been exhaustively investigated. I mean, she has not stood up to Hillary Clinton. And sure, she'll give you her talking points of where she differs with President Obama or Hillary Clinton. But what about issues like the $1 trillion tax increase that Hillary Clinton wants? Will she stand up on something like that? Or addressing the concerns of the health care law of higher premiums, higher deductibles, copay? She wants to expand that law. Or the flawed Iran agreement that she followed Hillary Clinton on, that's dangerous for the country in terms of Iran, the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, having access to nuclear weapon infrastructure. So I will stand up to either side no matter what. I've done it, and I'll continue to do that to put the interests of the people of New Hampshire first.
Governor?
Well, the fact is that Senator Ayotte is still supporting Donald Trump. She has sent out mailers that says Donald Trump needs her in the United States Senate to confirm his Supreme Court nominees. And that's, again, because she supports Donald Trump's agenda when it comes, for instance, to overturning Roe v. Wade. And she can try to distance herself, as she did on multiple occasions when she was asked whether she supported Donald Trump. But in fact, she said on 35 different occasions that she supported him. She called him a role model for our children. And then when the political winds seemed to change, that's when she changed her position. She has stood with her party, voting 5 times with Ted Cruz to shut the government down, and
Governor,
on the Supreme Court blockade.
Take 30 seconds to respond, then we got to move forward, Senator.
These are the talking points from Governor Hassan, but my actions speak for themselves. She has not stepped away from Hillary Clinton on one thing, I've actually taken the action of saying that I'm not going to be voting for our nominee because I am concerned about the actions that he has talked about in tapes. And, you know, so that speaks for itself. And I've done that time and time again in the Senate. That's why I have one of the most bipartisan records. I focus on getting things done for the people of the state. And so she can use her talking points all she wants on this issue. But the people of the state know that I'll stand up for them no matter what. And she certainly is not going to stand up to Hillary Clinton on behalf of any. If she can't call her out on this private email server, when is she ever going to call her out?
All right, thank you, candidates. Let's go to the next question now. You touched on the Supreme Court. That is the topic. It is coming from Kevin Landrigan, first going to Governor Hassan.
Great. It's great to be with both of you tonight. One of the reasons this presidential election, the stakes are so high, and this U.S. Senate race is so important, is that one party may be able to shape the landscape of the Supreme Court for decades to come, with as many as 3 justices. Governor Hassan, how much latitude would you give a President Donald Trump if he's duly elected by the American people when you consider nominations to the Supreme Court and other federal judgeships that will come before the Senate?
Well, thank you, Kevin, for the question. I am proud of the system that we have in New Hampshire where governors nominate people for the court, and the Executive Council, as your viewers probably know, confirm those nominations. And we have a nonpartisan Judicial Selection Commission that recommends candidates to the governor. I've committed and have always taken any nominee from that list of recommendations, and I'm very proud of the fact that over the last year or so, I've made 12 nominations to the court in New Hampshire, and 11 of those have been confirmed by a Republican majority Executive Council. So I know it's possible to work across party lines to do this, which is why I'm so concerned about Senator Ayotte's continual standing with her party to block the Supreme Court nomination. I always looked for character, obviously high qualifications and experience as a lawyer, the right kind of temperament in the courtroom, and someone who will always protect the civil rights of every American.
Senator Ayotte, you were against holding a hearing for President Obama's Supreme Court nominee, Merrick Garland, saying the American people should weigh in on who is appointed by casting their ballots next week. Didn't they weigh in 2012 when they elected Barack Obama?
Well, certainly the American people are going to weigh in on next Tuesday, and they'll cast their vote, and the next president will nominate that individual to serve on the Supreme Court. And we have a divided court right now. This is an important decision in terms of people's constitutional rights and what happens. And also, we have a divided government. And so waiting in and letting the people weigh in, I thought was important. But I also have a very bipartisan record where I have voted to confirm many of the president's nominees, in fact, almost close to 100, and worked to fill members of his cabinet. So I've been able to work across party lines. I will continue to do that. But I also want to make sure whoever is nominated by the next president, that they are qualified, understand what their constitutional philosophy is, and what their demeanor is in terms of serving on the highest court in this land.
You know, with regard to the Supreme Court, unlike any other branch of government, do you think it's appropriate to have lifetime appointments?
I do. It's under our Constitution, and our founders set those appointments up because they want to ensure that there are 3 co-equal branches of government and that branch would not be subject to political influence. And so this is important, and this is obviously an issue I will carefully review on behalf of the people of New Hampshire to make sure that their constitutional rights are protected and the person who serves is qualified.
Same question for you, Governor.
I certainly do support lifetime appointments in accordance with the Constitution. But, you know, I am very concerned about Senator Ayotte's support for the Supreme Court blockade. What she and her party really have decided to do was bring gridlock to the 3rd branch of government. We do have divided government right now, and often, unfortunately, the executive branch and the legislative branch have been at odds. And it was the Supreme Court that served as kind of a tiebreaker for that. And Senator Ayotte and her party decided to bring gridlock, as they have to their work in Congress, to the court. And just as she brought gridlock to that, she voted with Ted Cruz 5 times to shut the government down, only deciding to, after it was shut down and feeling the political heat of that here in New Hampshire, then she kind of decided she'd be part of a solution. Similarly, she's voted to defund Planned Parenthood 6 times, standing right with her party, as she has stood with the Koch brothers nearly 90% of the time in her first 4 years in office. She has been highly partisan, and she has stood with her party and its backers at very critical times where she could have broken and really helped the people and small businesses of New
Senator,
Hampshire.
you do have the option to respond.
You want to talk gridlock? It's vetoing a bipartisan budget because there's a reduction for business taxes, and then both parties overriding your veto. That's gridlock. That's bringing Washington style to what happened with the budget here in New Hampshire. And, you know, she keeps talking about the government shutdown. Well, the papers in this state, including the Concord Monitor, the Union Leader, described the work that I did with Senator Shaheen and other women senators to open up the government. She knows what she's saying is not true. I am one of the most bipartisan senators in the entire Senate. I stood up to Ted Cruz in my own caucus on the government shutdown, and you can go look at what people said at the time, because I led the effort to reopen the government, and people of this state know that.
Governor, you can take 30 seconds or we can move forward.
Well, certainly I'm proud to have Senator Shaheen's endorsement in this race, and I will always stand up for fiscal responsibility. Senator Ayotte had a few facts wrong, but at the end of the day, unlike Washington, what we did, I vetoed the budget. We had a continuing resolution. We kept government going, and then we brought people together and got a compromise, and I encouraged everyone to make the vote in September they did for the compromise budget that had important safeguards to protect fiscal responsibility so we could invest in critical economic priorities moving forward.
All right, thank you, candidates. Moving forward now, thoughts and prayers are with the families and friends of two police officers in Iowa who were murdered today, ambushed while sitting in their patrol cars. We don't know all the circumstances surrounding this yet, but it's been reported that the alleged shooter had a violent past with guns, and obviously incidents like this continue the discussion and argument when it comes to our gun laws here in this country, and that's where we're going to go next for the next question coming from Allie Morris.
Senator Ayotte, you are widely known to have opposed universal background checks related to firearm sales at gun shows and over the internet. How can checking to see if someone is potentially dangerous before buying a gun be a bad thing?
Well, first of all, my thoughts and prayers go to the families of those officers. And, you know, I prosecuted the case where we had Michael Briggs, who was a decorated hero, who was killed in the line of duty. And, you know, to me, standing up for our police is so important. And having been a murder prosecutor and working on difficult cases like that in our state, and having served as Attorney General, I appreciate so much how important it is that we keep guns away from criminals and terrorists. I also believe it's equally important that we stand up for the Second Amendment rights of our citizens. And so in the Senate, I support background checks. I've worked to get records that need to be in that system that are not in there now, and actually mental health records that have not gotten in, that New Hampshire's not gotten in. And I've also supported more prosecutions of the law, of violations of the background check system. And right now, New Hampshire needs more resources to do that for our troopers, to make sure, because right now some of that system is not working the way it should.
Right,
I'm
Senator.
very proud to have the endorsement of the troopers and the Manchester Patrolmen. They know that I'll work to keep us safe in light of all the threats we're facing.
Thank you. Allie.
Governor Hassan, you have twice vetoed a repeal of the state's concealed carry law, which requires people get a license to carry a concealed gun. Given the millions of dollars spent by pro-gun control groups to support your candidacy, why should Granite Staters believe that you would support the Second Amendment if you are elected to the U.S. Senate?
Well, thank you for the question, and my thoughts and prayers certainly go out to the families of the two officers and loved ones who were taken from us early this morning or last night in Iowa. Look, I fully support the Second Amendment. I believe that responsible gun owners have a right to use guns to defend themselves, to recreate, and to hunt. But I also think that that right has to be balanced with public safety. And as governor, I've thought it's appropriate to keep the gun laws that have been in existence in New Hampshire for about 100 years the way they were. They were described by former Republican Governor Meldrum Thompson as pretty good gun laws that work pretty well. So I've made sure we sustain those. But at the end of the day, one of the big concerns that I have is that as a national security and public safety issue, we should be closing the loopholes in our background check systems so that terrorists can't buy guns online and at gun shows. And even after the tragedy in Orlando, Senator Ayotte had the opportunity to vote to close those loopholes, and she has declined to do that. And that's a real difference between us in this race.
Take 30 seconds, then we've got to move forward.
Let me just say, I brought a group together after the Orlando shooting to address, if you're too dangerous to get on a commercial flight, your ability to purchase a firearm, while also setting up a system for those who think they're wrongfully on the list to go into a court and to make sure that they are off the list. And by the way, you know, as I look at our current background check system here in New Hampshire, unfortunately, the state police need more resources because they are having gaps in even enforcing current law because they don't have enough resources to enforce the law. It's one of the reasons why I've supported more prosecutorial resources at the federal level, because we have to enforce the laws that we have.
I don't mean to be the bad guy when it comes to the times and the rebuttals, but your campaigns will certainly let me know if one goes longer than the other. So I guess
That's fair, Josh.
All right, fair enough. Moving forward, obviously you're both well aware that New Hampshire is dealing with the crisis of addiction. Next question is coming from Kevin Landrigan, I believe going to Senator Ayotte.
Thank you, Josh. You know, that addiction, whether it's from heroin or fentanyl, continues at crisis levels in New Hampshire, where the state medical examiner projects nearly 500 people will die from overdoses this year. Senator Ayotte, your campaign aired a television ad that maintained the Comprehensive Addiction Recovery Act that you and Senator Shaheen co-sponsored, quote, will save lives and enable families to get the help they need, unquote. But as you know, so far only $7 million from the CARE bill has been appropriated for the entire nation, and only for 10 weeks. Is your ad an honest representation of the bill's ability to fight this epidemic?
Yeah, I mean, in that ad, you have Doug and Pam Griffin, who lost their beautiful daughter, Courtney, who I've gotten to know, and so many of the families here in New Hampshire who have lost someone that they love. This bill, we worked 3 years in the United States Senate to get it passed, and it focuses on the best federal response in prevention, treatment, and recovery. And I've been fighting for more resources along with Senator Shaheen, not only emergency funding, but through the funding appropriations process, more funding has been put in to assist states in heroin and fentanyl, making sure we're addressing these programs. And that bill just got signed into law this summer, and it is going to make a difference. And in fact, we're going to be fighting for more funding when the government funding bill expires in December. So that's only the beginning of it. And this will be a bill that will make a difference. But most of all, this issue also is about all of us working together to address it, to save lives. And finally, we need to deal with interdiction at the southern border. I've done that on the Armed Services Committee, getting more resources for the fentanyl, interdiction on fentanyl and heroin coming over the southern border. It's being trafficked here by Mexican drug cartels, and we need to support our law enforcement in securing that border as well.
Governor, you've made this issue a priority, but your critics have said at times you've been slow to respond. The man who you appointed as drug czar resigned amidst claims he was incompetent. Your veto of the state budget last June delayed the delivery of millions for drug abuse prevention. You were also unaware of a $12 million federal grant to fight the drug crisis until the media asked you about it. How does this reflect on your leadership?
Well, I've been all over the state, as you know, talking with people every day about the impact of this devastating epidemic on our families, our businesses, and our way of life. You know, whether it's talking with a colleague about her sister who's in recovery but is trying to regain the trust of her children, or mourning the loss of one of my son's classmates. This has impacted all of us. And since my first days in office, I've been fighting to get the resources we need to New Hampshire, fighting for funding for our drug task force teams, fighting for Medicaid expansion to first pass it and then reauthorize it. That's what treatment providers told us was the single most important thing we could do. We've just, since January, gotten $25 million out the door to places like Harbor Homes, to Hope for Recovery, and other places to make sure, Friendship House in Bethlehem, to make sure that we are doing everything we can to really put a dent from every angle: prevention, law enforcement, treatment, and recovery. We need to continue to work together to do that.
Thank you, candidates. Let's move into the lightning round. Just kind of get you on record on a couple of things, kind of condense those answers if we could. Let's start with one more of just relationships. Senator, we'll start with you. Who's your most trusted advisor who is not a member of your own party?
Who's my most trusted advisor who's not a member of my own party? My members of my family. I mean, my husband and my mother, and I turn to them first, and also the people here in New Hampshire that give me such great advice. You know, on the heroin epidemic, it was people, you know, like Doug and Pam Griffin who lost their daughter, and people like Melissa Cruz, who works and founded Hope for New Hampshire Recovery. Those are the best advisors that I have.
Do you have a conduit to communication, though, when we're talking to Democrats down in Washington that you...
Oh, yeah. I mean, I have one of the most bipartisan records. So I've worked across the aisle with Claire McCaskill on making sure that we protect victims of sexual assault. I've been glad to work across the aisle with Senator Sheen on so many issues for New Hampshire, whether it's support for the shipyard, our 157th refueling unit, the care for our veterans. I'm always looking for ways that we can find common ground and get things done.
Governor, who do you reach out to if you're looking for a Republican counterpoint?
Well, first of all, the people of New Hampshire are just great sources, and there are so many times when I am talking to people in the state and nobody identifies by party, which is the point. We work together in New Hampshire to get things done, and if elected leaders follow the example of the people of New Hampshire who just solve problems in their families, their businesses, their communities, without regard to partisanship, we can do pretty well. I have a lot of friends and family who happen to be Republicans, and I have a very close friend in New England who is a Republican, and we talk a lot about various issues.
All right. I kind of blew it on the lightning portion of that thing, but
yeah, you did.
We'll move it forward. According to Pew Research survey today, an all-time high, 57% of Americans now in favor of legalizing recreational marijuana. Governor, do you agree with the majority?
No, I don't. I was proud as governor to sign into law the bill that allows us to have medical marijuana. I think that that is the right and compassionate and appropriate thing to do. I also think a young person shouldn't have their life, any person shouldn't have their life ruined by a simple possession charge. So I was proud to enact a bill this year that allows us, our court system, more flexibility in terms of penalties. But I don't think legalizing marijuana is appropriate, especially given the epidemic we're dealing with heroin and opioids.
Same question for you, Senator.
I don't support legalizing marijuana. I've heard directly from those on the front lines, first responders, and also addiction experts, the concerns they actually have about legalizing marijuana and how it could be connected in terms of really dealing with issues like our heroin epidemic. So I would not support this, and obviously going back to being Attorney General of this state, working closely with law enforcement and hearing from them on it, I could not support it.
All right, next question. Are you in favor of federal term limits? Senator.
Yes, I am, and I've actually co-sponsored legislation on term limits.
And you said you'd cap it at 2.
At 2 in the Senate, 12 years.
Okay, your take.
The best term limit is the ballot box. I think we have a very engaged citizenry in New Hampshire, and we can decide when people deserve to be reelected and when they don't.
Okay, next question. Federal minimum wage, Governor, is $7.25. Federal minimum wage. What do you think it should be?
I think no one who is working full-time should live in poverty, which is in fact what happens right now when people earn the federal minimum wage. It's just morally unacceptable, and it also means that our families don't have the kind of disposable income to spend on consumer goods that drive our economy, right? So I would support raising it, phasing it in to $12 an hour, but we have to do it over time and work with our businesses.
Senator?
I believe that the focus shouldn't be on minimum wage. It should be on better paying jobs. So I travel around our state and I look at the jobs that are opening in manufacturing and technology that are well beyond minimum wage, because families can't live on minimum wage. And so I think better education in STEM and career technical education, a tax code that keeps jobs in this country. So when there have been efforts in Washington, one of the things I'm worried about is that I haven't been able to support them because we'd lose between 500,000 and 1 million jobs has been the economic analysis. So we don't want to lose jobs. Those are often sometimes entry-level jobs. My first job was as a bus girl at a restaurant here in New Hampshire.
Right,
so what I want to focus on is better jobs than minimum wage jobs.
All right, we'll end the lightning round with, I know it's November, but on the October Classic, and I'm sure a lot of people will be watching this as soon as this debate is over. So, Senator, Cubs or Indians?
Well, I kind of like to root for the underdog. The Cubs came from behind, so, you know, I think the Cubs, but I got to tell you, it's a bummer not to have the Sox in. I would have loved to see Big Papi go out with a World Series win.
Yeah, me too. Same question for you.
Well, we can agree on wishing the Red Sox were in the World Series, but I'm rooting for the Cubs.
All right, there it is. Let's get back to business. We're going to circle back to foreign policy now. And next question is coming from John DeStaso for Governor Hassan first.
We're actually going to, Josh, we're actually going to go to the college debt. And this is for both of you. And there's a new nonpartisan study out there that shows that more New Hampshire graduates left school with loans than in any other state. And the average student debt was more than $36,000. For Senator Ayotte, you voted twice for large budget bills that included cuts to Pell Grants, federal money for needy students, then voted against a bill specifically to restore $90 billion in cuts. Why?
John, that's not true. That budget resolution did not cut Pell Grants. In fact, what it did was made sure that there was annual oversight over the spending of Pell Grants, which I want that, by the way, for all federal spending. But I've actually worked to expand Pell Grants, and if I were against Pell Grants, I wouldn't have done that. I've worked with the vice presidential nominee for the Democratic Party, Tim Kaine, to expand them to career technical education and also supporting to expand them so you can seek access to them year-round. Perkins grants, they were trying to end those in Washington. 5,000 students in New Hampshire would have been impacted. You can go see my speech on the Senate floor on September 29th, 2015, where I fought to keep those availability of that for people in New Hampshire. So for me, you know, I had student loans myself, paid them off, then transferred that money into child care. I know how important this is for the kids in New Hampshire. This is very important. And by the way, when it comes to education, I'd like to talk about that more because, you know, what Governor Hassan did to the kids in Croydon by vetoing a bill that would have allowed them, Croydon doesn't have a middle school, these middle school students, their parents and the local school board wanted to send them to a Montessori school, and she vetoed a bill that would have allowed them to do it. I want parents to decide these issues. And to me, I think there's a big difference in terms of how we view education.
Take a little extra time to respond, please, Governor.
Well, first of all, I know how important to both our families and our businesses making sure that higher education is affordable, and it's something that I've made a priority as governor. We want to make sure that everybody who works hard has a chance to get ahead and stay ahead, and that our middle class is growing and thriving. That starts with access to affordable higher education, which is why I worked as governor to freeze in-state tuition at our public universities for the first time in 25 years and lower it at our community colleges. And it's why in Washington I would continue to make bringing the cost of higher education down a priority, but my economic plan also speaks to expanding Pell Grants because it is such a critical issue for our young people and our businesses. And Governor, I do have to... okay.
We're going to keep with this topic, though, but we got to keep moving forward. Next question, please. Yeah,
back to you, Governor. You support Pell Grants, but New Hampshire is one of 2 states that does not offer need-based aid to students. Why hasn't that been a priority in the last 4 years?
Well, I'll continue my answer for just a second to say that on the Pell Grant issue that you asked, Senator Ayotte, people should just check for themselves. On March 27th, 2015, she voted for a budget that had $90 billion of cuts to Pell Grants. Day before, she voted against an amendment to that budget that would have restored that $90 billion. And the federal budget director said that that bill contained $90 billion of cuts. And it's one of the reasons Senator Shaheen voted against it. We should be doing more on scholarships in New Hampshire. I was glad that in my first budget we were able to restore scholarships that had been cut in previous budgets.
Okay. Your option. Senator, please.
No, I just, you know, you can go read it yourself, Senate Concurrent Resolution 11, and I got to tell you, it didn't cut Pell Grants. But, you know, also, I think this issue about education and the fact that Governor Hassan here in New Hampshire doesn't want to allow parents and local school boards to decide where it's best for their kids to go to school. And I think that's perhaps because federal education unions have pumped millions of dollars in this race who are supporting her campaign. I'm going to stand for the kids first, you know, not unions, and make sure that kids can go where their parents think is best.
Well, what I would like Senator Ayotte to do and agree with me about is to stand for the New Hampshire Constitution. The New Hampshire Constitution says that state dollars can't be used to fund private schools. And so we have a court ruling that says we can't spend the money that way, and so we can't spend the money that way. And we will work with the people of Croydon to make sure that their children have access to a good quality education, something something we work to do throughout the state.
All right, thank you very much, Governor. Moving forward now to foreign policy. I apologize for my mistake earlier. Allie Morris has the next question.
So this is first to you, Senator Ayotte. As Iraqi forces continue to push into Mosul for a battle to unseat ISIS, there are reports of just how complicated it will be to defeat them, considering how entrenched they are. If this is truly a great stronghold for the terrorist group, should the U.S. be sending in a significant ground force to back up the Iraqis and debilitate ISIS?
Well, this issue is so important. Serving on the Armed Services Committee, chairing the Readiness Subcommittee for the nation, keeping our country safe. And we do have to destroy ISIS. We have to destroy radical Islamist terrorists who want to destroy our way of life. And what our men and women in uniform are doing right now, we have to understand we have 4,500 troops who are there, and we have members of our own guard who have been there in the Middle East and supporting those efforts. We need to make sure that they have the rules of engagement that they need to go after the enemy and to keep us safe, making sure that we engage our allies, both our Arab allies and also NATO, to take greater action against ISIS. But we don't need a traditional ground force right now to take out ISIS, but we do need stronger American leadership in engaging NATO in a more aggressive way, our Arab allies in a more aggressive way, and we have to push back against Russia, who is undermining our interests, and Iran at this point. Because if we don't do that, even taking Mosul, the post-period there will still continue to be a challenge, but we have to defeat ISIS and do all that we can.
Thank you, Senator. Governor, what's your take on this?
Well, first of all, the campaign to take back Mosul is absolutely critical to our overall strategy to destroy ISIS wherever it is. So I am fully supportive of the campaign to do it. I think we're doing it in the right way, with Iraqi forces taking the lead, with the United States doing the airstrikes and providing support and training with special operations. I am particularly proud of the New Hampshire National Guard for its support and training activities in the Middle East, and I hope everyone viewing tonight keeps the men and women of the Guard in their thoughts and prayers. I've laid out a clear plan to defeat ISIS. It includes increasing airstrikes, making sure that our special operations forces are going after command and control of ISIS, as well as doing the support and training they're doing, surging our intelligence, working with our international allies to make sure that we're arming moderate forces. And it is long past time for the United States Congress to take up and pass a revised new authorization of use of military force, so the American people are clear about what it will take to destroy ISIS.
Thank you, Governor. Follow-up coming from Allie Morris.
Just quickly, Governor, so would you support sending a significant ground force?
No. I think it is appropriate, the level of support and training that our special operations are doing, but I don't support ongoing continuous ground troops.
And as a result of the fighting in and around Mosul, the UN expects more than 1 million civilians to be impacted by the fighting. Governor Hassan, you were the only Democratic governor to call for a temporary ban on Syrian refugees coming into the U.S. Several months later, you said that the federal government had improved its communications with state governments about who is coming in. How did the communications improve specifically, and how many more Syrians, if any, should the U.S. allow in going forward?
Well, thank you for the question. As governor, the security of my state is always the first priority I have. And so after the attack in Paris, I thought, when the FBI and CIA directors expressed concern about whether our refugee vetting system was working as it was supposed to, as the guidelines and policies laid out on paper said it was supposed to, I thought it was appropriate for the administration to take a temporary pause and really do the kind of audit you need to address the concerns raised by the CIA and the FBI. That's something I still think they should do, and I'm disappointed that they didn't. They did improve communications in terms of giving us much more regular updates about refugees coming in. But at the end of the day, what we should be doing is focusing on making sure that our vetting system is better. We should be making sure that all of our entryways, including the visa waiver system, is better, monitoring social media, and working particularly with our European allies on their information and vetting processes as well.
Just to be clear, Governor, do you believe a ban still needs to be in place?
I think a temporary pause makes a lot of sense. I still do, so that we can address the concerns that the CIA and FBI have raised.
Okay. Senator, please.
Well, certainly serving on the Armed Services Committee, this issue, unless we can guarantee that someone who is coming here from that region has no connection to ISIS, they should not come here. And unfortunately, we have added on this in the Senate, we had votes on in strengthening that vetting system, including requiring our national security advisors and making sure that the armed services had to certify that no one coming here was a threat. That got blocked by the Senate Democrats, and this is an issue that has not been addressed. And President Obama keeps pushing to have more of these refugees who have come here. And in terms of more communication, I haven't heard what that is. But my concerns are the same, that we know ISIS is purposely trying to infiltrate the refugee population. We've heard that in the Armed Services Committee from our commanders in Europe. We've heard that from our top intelligence officials. And Hillary Clinton wants to bring more refugees in here, and we haven't heard how that is going to work when we still don't have the information to know that some of these refugees, whether or not they're connected with ISIS or not.
All right, thank you, Senator. Moving forward to everybody's favorite get-along topic, the Affordable Care Act, and questions coming from Kevin Landrigan.
Governor, under Obamacare, employer health plan premiums have gone up $5,000. And the Obama administration announced last week individual premiums on the exchange would go up 25% nationally, though the rates are lower in New Hampshire, some plans as high as 15%. How can you tell mom and pop businesses that the ACA is a good deal for them?
Well, first of all, as many of your viewers know, my husband Tom and I have 2 children, the oldest of whom happens to have very severe and pervasive physical disabilities and a lot of medical conditions that go with that. At various times, Ben has had as many as 9 or 10 doctors and over a dozen medications. So we are well aware of the strengths and flaws of our healthcare system. The Affordable Care Act certainly needs some very important improvements, but we can't go back to a time before the ACA where people with pre-existing conditions couldn't get coverage. We can't go back to a time where students couldn't stay or young people couldn't stay on their parents' health insurance. Now, we know for small businesses there are some real challenges with the ACA, but one of the things that the ACA allowed us to do in New Hampshire was put together our bipartisan Medicaid expansion program, which is providing health care to over 50,000 hardworking Granite Staters. If you repeal the ACA, you pull the rug out of those folks, and my opponent has voted to repeal Medicaid expansion now 5 times. And we know we have to continue to improve the ACA, but we shouldn't completely repeal it.
Kevin?
Senator, this is another issue that voters are really skeptical that anything's going to change. The House Republican Congress has 40 times passed the repeal of Obamacare. All have fallen flat. So tonight, what can you say can honestly be accomplished next year in Congress so that people continue to have health insurance, but that it's not outrageously expensive?
Yeah, this is such an important issue because I'm hearing from so many people in New Hampshire higher deductibles, higher copays, higher premiums, and the Affordable Care Act, unfortunately, is not so affordable for New Hampshire families and especially small businesses. Having roundtables with small business owners, my husband has a small business, but others who are hearing very significant increases that they are getting, especially for those small business owners. And, I know one thing, if you elect Governor Hassan to the Senate, you're going to be in a position where we won't make changes to address more competition, more choice, more transparency, and really making sure we drive down healthcare costs. She talks about my votes. I did vote 5 times to see if we could repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act. But I've also voted, when it came to a vote on Medicaid expansion, to expand that for 2 years so that we could have more flexibility for states in serving those populations. I don't want to go backwards on pre-existing conditions, but if we don't make significant changes to this law and have, instead of one size fits all from Washington, which, by the way, Hillary Clinton wants to expand it, not address the rising costs that so many are struggling for in New Hampshire.
Thank you. Take 30 seconds, and also you said that it needs some improvement. Give us an example.
Sure. So first of all, our Medicaid expansion program, bipartisan in New Hampshire, is a state-specific solution that Senator Ayotte has voted to repeal. So when you think about what the improvements are, we need to, among other things, lower the cost of prescription drugs. One of the things that Senator Ayotte has failed to do in the Senate is stand up and allow Medicare to negotiate for prescription drug prices, something I support. She's voted against allowing us to import prescription drugs from Canada, which would add competition. She has stood with Big Pharma as they have been a major donor to her campaigns.
Governor.
And that's really one of the differences between the two of us, but it's one of the major things we could do to lower health care costs. We also need to repeal the medical
Governor,
device
please.
tax and the Cadillac tax.
Thank you very much. Talk about donors, and well documented, this is going to be the most expensive race in state history. $100 million have been spent in outside money, much of it on negative attacks against both of you. Basically, you're able to deny ownership since you can't coordinate with third-party groups. But tonight, I want to ask you, what is the most unfair negative ad? This is for you first, Senator Ayotte. What is the most unfair negative ad which aired in this race about your opponent, do you believe?
About your opponent?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, so as I look at the ads that have aired, you know, I think in the beginning I called for some of the ads that came down that attack Governor Hassan on the heroin epidemic. Well, I think that there are issues you can raise, as Kevin Landrigan asked her about tonight, on how she's handled this. I really want to work on solving this problem. So I've already done that. She has not called out any of the ads that have been run against me. And we could have kept this money out of this race. I offered Governor Hassan the People's Pledge. That was a pledge that was in place between Elizabeth Warren and Scott Brown that Senator Shaheen offered in her race to keep this money out, how we would conduct ourselves as the parties. Unfortunately, she didn't want to accept that, I think because you see all the ads on your TV. She wanted this special interest money to come in this race, and it's very unfortunate because this really should be about New Hampshire.
All right, Senator, respond to that. And have you seen anything that you think is unfair has crossed the line about Senator Ayotte?
Well, first of all, I signed a strengthened People's Pledge and sent it to Senator Ayotte, and she refused to sign it. But at the end of the day, there's only one candidate standing before you who supports campaign finance reform and overturning Citizens United. I support overturning Citizens United, which is the decision that says, in fact, that corporations are people. I don't think corporations are people. I don't think they should be able to bring on all this dark money spending into our state. And, you know, Senator Ayotte's voting record kind of tells you that she thinks corporations are people too, because she votes with Wall Street, she votes with Big Pharma, she votes with the Koch brothers and Big Oil. At the end of the day, they are very eager, and they're running all these ads against me because they want her to return to Washington so that they will have a reliable vote for their agenda.
Take 30 seconds to respond, Senator. We got to move forward.
Talk is cheap. I offered her the People's Pledge. It's the same language that was in place in the mass race to keep the money out. She wants the money in because you've seen it on your TV. Harry Reid Super PAC, $15 million. Mike Bloomberg, the former mayor of New York City, over $7 million. The unions, millions of dollars. Hillary Clinton Super PAC, millions of dollars. You can see it on your TV right now. All of those false, misleading attacks that come forward, that's because she didn't want this
Senator,
money in this race. So, you know, she could have kept it out.
We got to get going. Time is flying. We get to our final question before you can have closing statements. Talk about veterans first. New Hampshire's the only state in the lower 48, Governor, you're well aware, that does not have a full-service VA hospital. You're also aware of the VA choice option that Senator Ayotte and Senator Shaheen have been working on. But you still think we need a full-service hospital. Why?
I think we need a full-service hospital for our veterans. I'm the daughter of a World War II veteran, and one of the things that I focus on as governor is how we can make sure that veterans have the benefits that they deserve and have access to employment, to housing. I'm proud of the work we've done in New Hampshire to expand the veterans' home, add more beds to it, and create a new dementia unit for it, along with the Vets Connect program and many others. I think we need a full-service veterans hospital, one, because our veterans in New Hampshire deserve it. They shouldn't have to travel long distances to get the care that they need. I also think it is very critical that as we have more and more veterans who have specific injuries because of the new and evolving kind of threats that our enemies and adversaries have, they have different and new kinds of injuries. We need to bring the expertise of the veterans medical community to bear.
Believe me. At one point, Senator, you were in favor of a full-service hospital, but it's not as urgent as it was because of the VA choice card.
No, I'm one of the first bills I introduced in the Senate, and I believe Senator Shaheen as well, is to have New Hampshire have a full-service hospital. You know, I'm the wife of a combat veteran. You know, my grandfather served in World War II, my stepfather in Vietnam. We are a family of service, and as I think about all the issues that are out there, we have to get this right for our veterans and their families. And so I have been working with Senator Shaheen to get the VA Choice program right. There's too much bureaucracy in the VA right now. Our veterans should be able to get the best care without waiting in line. And also there should be more accountability in the VA. I've introduced legislation to have more accountability, to claw back bonuses to people who committed misconduct, who unfortunately didn't serve our veterans but got to keep bonuses. So there's no more important issue to me than making sure that our veterans get the care that they have earned defending this great nation. And I've been proud to work with Senator Shaheen on this, and we will continue to fight to make sure that the choice program is right, but also we'll continue to fight for a full-service hospital.
Senator, thank you. We've carved out some time at the end of the program for you to deliver closing statements. We'll start with you, Senator Ayotte.
First of all, thank you, Josh. Thank you, Governor Hassan, for being a part of this debate tonight. Most of all, I want to thank you at home for listening, because this election is not about the negative, misleading ads that you see on your TV. This election is about you and your family and who is going to stand up to be that independent voice for New Hampshire with a positive vision for our country. I have one of the most bipartisan records in the Senate because I know the only way we're going to get things done is by working together, like the law I worked on to address our heroin epidemic, or solutions I've worked on to help our small businesses, or to make college and health care more affordable. There's so much more work to do. I've been proud to fight for those who keep us safe in a dangerous world as the wife of a combat veteran. But I know the only way we're going to get things done is to stand up to both sides when they're taking us in the wrong direction, but to find common ground when we can agree to deliver results for our state and for this country. That's what I've done in the Senate. That's why I'm running again. I ask for your vote on November 8th so that we can continue the work that we have started together for this great state. Thank you so much.
Governor, your closing statement, please.
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Senator Ayotte and Josh, our panelists, and to all our viewers. You know, growing up, my dad, who fought in World War II in the Battle of the Bulge, would sometimes look at us at the breakfast table and ask, "What are you doing for freedom today?" Well, Dad was serious, because my father, along with his generation, who we've come to call the greatest generation, by believing in a cause greater than themselves, saved the world and then built this country into the greatest military and economic power the world had ever seen. That's the spirit that I have tried to bring to my work as governor, and it is the spirit that should inform our work in Washington, D.C. Unfortunately, what we see is a nation's capital captured by corporate special interests. And the choice in this election is really clear. Are we going to continue to have a senator who votes with those corporate special interests, whose agenda is shaped by them? They already have enough senators in Washington. Or are we going to have a senator who has a record, as I do, of always putting the people and small businesses of New Hampshire first? That's my commitment to all of you. I'll always put you first, and I respectfully ask for your vote.
Well, candidates, thank you very much for participating tonight. Best of luck to both of you in the final days of this campaign.